For this week's episode of Revenue Mechanics, I had the pleasure of being interviewed by Marc Mac on the Hump podcast. Tune in. It's a long episode. We delve into a lot of things that both of us have learned, my background, etc. So strap yourselves in and enjoy.
Hey, happy hump day. Happy hump day to everybody out there. Welcome. It is the hump. We're live again. It's Wednesday, 5:30. I got my man, the Aussie himself, Sam Shaper, to join us today from Shapers OS. You see that at the bottom of the screen. Got recommended to you by Adam Mandarovich, excuse me. I always get his name wrong. He's probably going to kill me. He's probably already stabbing me in the back, I guess. He's been awesome, man. I had him last week. We had an amazing conversation. And, of course, he recommended you to come on. And thank you, actually. We had the slot open tonight. I was going to do a solo show and talk about some cold calling probably because that's what I do best. But love that I have you here today. So welcome, man. What's going on? How you been?
Yeah, good, Mark. Good. Thanks for having me on as well. And shout out to Adam. Thanks for the recommendation. Adam's been a good friend, and for me, I guess, kind of validated some of the experiences that I've had coming up through the sales world and then transitioning into the marketing side and seeing those interconnectivities. Seeing someone that's good, probably 20 odd years older than me, have the same experiences and same thought process has been validating. So it's been awesome to connect with him, and now awesome to jump on with you.
Yeah, and I'm probably also 20 some odd years older than you.
We look the same age. The hair's gone.
Yeah, so. Well, hey, listen, this is the new sexy, I guess. I don't
Life
know.
in sales that does this.
Yeah. Well, that's right. That's what happens to us. A couple of weeks in sales is what you look like, right?
Yeah,
that should be like the banner.
Yeah,
you want to be in sales, you're gonna lose your head. You better get some head.
Graham Hawkins and Rob Cassidy over from here in Oz, and same thing.
Yeah,
we've all just.
I
think Adam's like probably the only like experienced seller that I know that's still got a good head of hair.
It's his gene. Yeah, it's in the genes. Yeah, like probably right. Whatever his background is, but you could tell he's in shape and he's like, so. Yeah, so no, we had a great conversation, and sales definitely does take a toll on people, and I've been doing it for 30 years myself, and so but yeah, it's so interesting with this medium today, right? LinkedIn and some of these communities and other channels where we have the opportunity to meet people of different age groups and generations and actually understand that, heck, some of the same things are happening or has happened to those people, and you could benefit from their experience. And when I was like your age, I guess, or in my 20s, of course, maybe even as far as 30 something, right? We didn't even have, like, LinkedIn was around. It's been around a long time, but it wasn't like this. And there was no communities, and there was no, there was barely any technology, even like in the 90s and stuff when I was coming up in sales. And just the fact that now that, like, even if I or you, like, even at your stage of your career, if you just share one tip or one pain or one failure or one something that somebody finds and can read it and see it and have access to it and digest it and then not make that same mistake or benefit from it, it's just amazing, right? Because I didn't have that growing. Like, I had to make the mistakes, right? Adam had to make these mistakes. We had to make the mistake, correct it, and then write about it in a newsletter, a written newsletter, if you really wanted to get it out, or go to like a show. Now, something happens to you, you can instantaneously post it.
I reached thousands of people in one hit.
I mean, isn't that great?
Crazy.
I mean, it is crazy, but at the same time, it leads us to some of what we're going to talk about tonight, which is what people really actually believe
Mm,
is the truth, is the Bible, right? And I'll before I let you jump into your intro, I just want to add one quick thing. I think what has happened is that every generation always wants to be innovators, right? And so what's happened though is that we've done so much for so long that now all of a sudden people are like kind of almost reinventing the wheel, right? And like
mm,
what we're hearing in the sales world is like, let's go back to the way it was, let's go back. Well, like wh-
the-
it's never changed. The
yeah,
psychology of sales has always been there.
the
So
framework.
what are we really doing? Are we just
Mm,
adding to the chaos, these technologies and what have you? And so, does it add to the silos and all these things? And we'll talk a little bit about that. But I want to give you a full 2 minutes to just tell the audience, my audience, your audience, who Sam Shaper is, how you came up with Shaper's OS, and what you're doing now, where people can find you, what's got you, what's your bug today, like what's the thing that you're working on the
yeah.
most right now.
Definitely. Thanks, Mark. So my primary background was in the fitness industry when I first came out of school. And well, I started in, long story short, when I moved here from England, so from England to Australia, uh, wanted to go to university, but then found out you can't get university supports. Like over here, it's called HEX debt. So like
Hmm.
where the government funds you and you pay it back. So student loan. Um,
Hmm.
couldn't get that because I wasn't an Aussie citizen, which my mum didn't know at the time either. So I was like, oh shit. So they're like, you've either got to pay for university up front or you can't come. I was like, oh, well, I don't have that money. My mum didn't have that money, so
Nobody has
I,
that money.
yeah, I couldn't go to uni. So that was a blessing in disguise now. But just kind of like got stuck in terms of what I was going to do. And I love fitness. I'd played soccer or football at a pretty high level over here. And I was like, I like fitness. So I'll just do a certificate in PT. I can pay for that. And so I became a PT.
Huh?
Um, got into the fitness industry, and
Right.
while I was working at Macca's as well, which we can go into later, which because I learned a lot from working there. But in the fitness industry was where I kind of guess cut my teeth into sales and had to learn how to prospect and get clients, retain clients, keep them happy, because I worked out pretty early on that it was much easier to keep a client than it was to try and find new ones all the time. Um,
Well,
and as I was progressing through that industry, I had an opportunity, or I saw an opportunity in a sales job that was promising an on-target earnings of 350 to 400K, which was a
we'll talk.
lot more than what I was making as a PT at the time. So I was like,
Right.
wow, I'll apply for that. I want that. I got the job. So I left the PT world and went to that.
Right.
On-target earnings were very, very exaggerated. No one at the company was achieving that.
Of
Uh,
course.
but yeah, that was where I first got into like I guess you could say like a growth at all cost sales engine and model. I
Yeah.
started out appointment setting. I had to set 50 plus appointments a week with an 80% sharp rate as my KPI. Otherwise, I didn't get any commissions. So made sure
So
that
did you
happened.
get commissions?
Did
Okay.
I managed to managed to hit those targets? Never missed them.
Nice.
So that was like that's where had to learn very fast on how to get appointments, but not only just get appointments, but get them to stick, and then how do I set the
Yeah.
frame, stuff like that. Uh, but in that gig, it was also where I saw the repercussions of a growth at all cost model of just a
Mm.
hey, book more meetings model. So which we can go into a bit later in the
Mhm.
call, but yeah, saw the downstream effects of what that did to that company. And that company, which we can again go into a bit later, actually ended up going out of business not too long
Right.
after I left, about probably a year after I left. Um,
Hmm.
and then I got into working with another company where I saw more of what, like, say, Adam and I and yourself talk about, where I was the first sales rep that took over from the founder and played that pivot role in the middle between him, because the founder was still in customer success delivering for clients. I would
Mm.
talk to marketing and we would kind of all liaise back and forth. And we grew that company from sub seven figures to over 10 million annual revenue in 18 months. And the founder sold out of that, which was a bit annoying for me at the time because I was making some very good money in commissions. So he killed the
Well,
golden goose.
Well, did they sell it and dismantle it? I mean, why couldn't you stay?
Sold it and dismantled it. They turned it into a subscription-based model and got rid of the sales side. And yeah, so
Sure.
that kind of well, not wrecked me, but then I went into my own business, learnt the harsh side of business where I brought on a business partner who ended up sweeping the company from under me. And then decided to get into the marketing world, which is where I mainly sit today. As I saw, obviously, through those experiences, the influence that marketing, when done well, can have on sales when the two work well together. So after a couple of years of agency life and freelancing, etc., formed what's now Shapers or Shapers OS, where we essentially leverage paid advertising to help amplify brands and synergize marketing and sales to bring them onto the same team.
Right. And
So
shapers is actually a word. I didn't even know it's people who can go from visualization to actualization.
yeah, Ray
As the
Dalio quote.
definition is. What's that?
So Ray Dalio quote, I got it from his book
Yeah.
Principles.
Yeah.
And I read that back in that first sales gig actually, and I was like, oh, that's cool. You know, I was 24 at the time, so it was like a little bit of a, wow, am I a shaper? Because it ties into the
Yeah.
last name. So
Yeah.
yeah, decided easy way to pick a company name.
No, that's awesome, man. I thought it was like if that's your last name and then you were actually in fitness and now it's your company name is awesome. Like it just works, right? It works for you.
Yeah.
No, I totally appreciate the story. I'm glad that you found your way. You know, what I think is really interesting is you really dove into that first level sales, top of funnel sales environment, and then, you know, was thrusted even into that kind of solo salesperson role where, you know, there's nobody else and you're really trying to pull everything together and maybe start to build a team and a real sales engine, if you will. But what's more captivating is the fact that you then realized maybe your passion or your really focus lied on the marketing side, and being that you know what it takes on the sales side and what they go through is only going to would only make you more ideal on the marketing side. Tell me, what was the biggest challenge in that transition, or do you feel like you were just touching a little bit of sales and then you moved to marketing, so it wasn't that huge of a kind of mind shift?
Yeah, it wasn't like I definitely have more of an appreciation for what marketing had, like the pressure marketing are under from when I was in the sales side. Because in the sales side, it's easy to get frustrated with marketing, especially if they're running like a low intent lead gen model, and you're like, all the leads they're sending me are crap. Like I might as well just go prospect my own. But
Should be.
yeah, and you definitely should be. But when I started transitioning and supporting on the marketing side, the biggest challenge I probably found was the um, misconception of the role marketing should be playing within the business ecosystem, and trying to educate founders and even in some cases like marketing leaders, that hey, sales don't just want a CRM full of crap leads. They don't just want ebook downloads, white paper downloads, and stuff. They want people that have registered interest in what we are doing. Otherwise, they might as well go foster those relationships and spend their time prospecting their own, because they can do that through LinkedIn and all these platforms that we have now that make it way easier than it used to be. So that's probably been the biggest challenge, is just bringing people around to that way of thinking. But once they do come around to that way of thinking, yeah, we generally see quite quick results. For example, just as a small sample, with a company that I recently started working with, and the guy bought into that idea of the ecosystem and how it's not necessarily does Facebook do this, does Google do this, etc. It's how do they all work together, and then how does that all work within sales? They prior to that had no marketing running at the time because they had reshifted the product and the service, etc. So there was no sales coming through. We turned on the marketing. We got sales coming through that attributed to our efforts, but an additional probably 50% of sales were not attributed, but there were no sales prior to coming in. So we know that the marketing efforts, even though they weren't attributed to that specific ad or that specific channel, had started to uplift and influence the entire revenue engine, just through the fact that there were no sales, and when we turned it on, there were sales. um,
Yeah.
so helping that, reach that understanding and getting out of the, as we briefly chatted about, like the siloed thinking and thinking more in terms of an ecosystem and how marketing and sales can be on the same team and not one fighting the other to keep their job because, they're trying to prove themselves, or whatever little in-house fighting goes on. That's always a challenge.
Well, that fighting, that infighting, if you will, or that, egos on both sides of the equation. The
Mm,
reason why that's existing is because they don't see themselves as a team, as a
yeah,
collective. Marketing just has to, what I always think. I think sometimes marketing feels a little stressed because they feel the stress because, or they should feel more stressed than a sales rep. Like on the sales side, you think, oh, well, if I'm stressed out and I don't know what's going on with a prospect or a customer, I'm just going to call,
yeah,
right? Like marketing, their first instinct is not to call somebody, right?
yeah,
Typically, their first instinct would be to send them an email or, send them some kind of whatever, right? I think that's right there and there. It's like they're on different pages. They're
mm,
considered different people. I didn't apply for a sales job. I applied for a marketing job. So my understanding of the marketing is, and everyone's got different levels of marketing genius, right? But it's like, um, you know, the feedback loop this just doesn't exist, or
yeah,
it's non-existent in most places. And why? Because they don't know how to talk to each other, because they were never given a structure by which to communicate through. Send them an email and tell, like, it's almost the same as the disconnect between an SDR and an AE in some
yeah,
cases, where, like, I've employed a tactic when I first came into the SaaS world 5 years ago. Part of my attraction to the industry was the fact that there was all this crap going on, and I was like, it just
prevent
doesn't make any
technical
sense to me.
problems.
And yeah, and one of the things was that they were these silos, right? And where do we get this lead, right? And so I don't think that you really, like, that infighting goes on because it's a lot of, like, it's maybe the nature of the prospect, really, in a sense, right? Because, like, let's say I send an email, and I mentioned this to you. I send an email to a prospect as a sales rep. In the email, maybe I even had a phone conversation, right? And even in CRM, it says I had a completion and I activated the lead. I sent them an email, right? And then all of a sudden, the guy or gal opens my email and reads it, comes back to it at some point, and then opens our website or goes to the landing page that I presented or whatever.
Jumps on Google. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, or maybe they go through Google, right?
Mm,
Right? Instead of, that's the worst. See, people, that was the worst thing that happened when Google put like the search in the address bar, where you could just put it in there and it all becomes a Google search. That was a big problem. Like, if I had just looked up that email, that website, like, the link is there. It says, www.shapersos.com, but they'll go to that address bar, Google, and just put shapers.com. And
yeah.
then it'll take them to the Google page. And then, oh, okay, so now I'm at your site and I'm going through it, and I'm on the landing page. It says book a demo. Well, that's what I want to do. So I book a demo, right? And now all of a sudden marketing wakes up in the morning and they're like, oh shit, I got an MQL, right?
Yay.
Excellent, right? And they start working it. And even if they go into CRM, maybe they're not even using CRM. Maybe they are, but they're not really, it's assigned to this person. There is a task there, but I have a goal. So I'm going to, the right thing to do at that point is, if there was that level of interaction between the prospect and the sales rep, for that marketing person, honestly, to let that salesperson know, hey, this actually came through, the website, and we know that it is your, that you had contacted them. We see that, and then,
Mm,
or maybe that conversation doesn't even happen. It just gets sent to that rep automatically. It should. That's the culture change, right?
yeah.
And that's just like even like on a minor basis. But what about all the MQLs that are coming in, and then they have all these, ways to score those and say, oh, is this good? Is this bad? But they don't, because they're going to give it to the AE. The AE is going to do the discovery call and either DQ it out or move it into an opportunity. And then where did it really come from, right? So the
Mm,
SDR who may have made that phone call or sent that email gets the short end of the stick. It doesn't get attributed to him, right?
yeah.
The other thing is with attribution, and I've hired some marketing people, and I've done some marketing. Obviously, I'm more of a sales oriented person, sales rep, but marketing is it's funny because this guy, my good friend Ryan Reiser, right?
Yep.
I'm sure you know him. He calls me a telemarketer, right? And I used to get mad. I used to actually say, like, dude, I'm not, because like everybody thinks telemarketer, that's that annoying person that has
Yeah.
nothing really
His
of
name
value
down.
to sell.
Yep.
and
Yep.
so, but he asked me one day, he said, do you use the telephone to market your product and services? And I said, yes. Well, then you're a telemarketer, right? And
Yeah.
so I was like, oh, I gotta live with that one, right? And but that's just it. It's like, well, okay, so how did this prospect arrive on our plate? Did he come from Google? Did he just Google search? Did he come from a community? I mean, let's talk about that, man. How do you even attribute
Yeah. It's
dark social?
yeah, one of the prominent thought leaders, I guess, that to his credit, and someone I follow quite a lot, Chris Walker, brought a lot of this to the front, especially through LinkedIn, and voiced his opinion on this, that a lot of people were thinking, but he articulated super well, and now people are like, "Fuck, someone finally made sense of this thing," because I believe, and obviously, as Chris says, like attribution is a lie that's been sold to companies from tech vendors.
Yep.
Because to think that we can distill a person's thought process down to a number that's trackable through digital attribution is like, it's like trying to catch the wind. Like, yeah, you just can't. 80% of it, of what they do, is untraceable. Like, for example, what's something I bought recently? So I signed on with a mentor or someone, like a coach, to start working with recently. And I've been following him for like a year across. I'd heard, got a recommendation from a friend, followed him on YouTube for a bit, followed him on Instagram. Then I saw an ad for a Black Friday thing, and I was like, okay, cool. All right, I'll pop through and have a conversation. Now, did that ad produce the sale? On paper, it did. So the marketing
Yeah.
team running that ad could say, yes, we got that lead, we got that sale. But it was
Right.
actually my friend, and this is just me recalling it. There's probably other things that I've forgotten in there as well that helped influence that sale. My friend mentioning him, that then led to me going and searching him, following him for a while, consuming content, and then seeing an offer that attracted me to pop through. Like, all that buying journey is not traceable. The only way you can really know that is through actually asking the person. But even then, a lot of the time, they forget because they got life going on as well. So even that's not
Sure.
100% accurate.
Yeah. How
Um,
did you find out? How did you come to be on this call today? I don't know. I was searching for this. I was searching for that. So that even if even them saying they searched, well,
yeah,
where, what,
Google,
you know,
forums, groups,
right.
talking to friends. It's just a lie that's being told by, again, by tech vendors, plus also the actual marketing platforms themselves, Google, Facebook, etc. Because they obviously want you to spend money on their platform, so they want to say that, hey, our platform did this and got you this revenue, we got you this ROAS. Um,
Mm,
what that then does, though, is create these silos where the Facebook advertising team is trying to claim credit, the Google advertising team is trying to claim credit, the LinkedIn, the YouTube. Then you've got sales SDRs trying to claim credit as well. Like you said there, oh, we reached out to them first, and then they went to you on Google, and then they saw something on Facebook. So everyone then starts to fight and try and claim credit. Uh, versus like a championship winning team, like in soccer or any other sport. Um, like the striker could say, "Well, I scored all the goals, so therefore we won this championship because of me." Um, but obviously, a good team, a
Some
good
do.
some do, yeah, some do, and some do carry trophies, like carry
Yeah.
teams to trophies and stuff. But without a good defense, without a good goalkeeper, without the rest of the team actually contributing, the team's not going to win the championship. So when I say work with clients, one of the things I try and get them into the mindset of is get out of attribution thinking and into ecosystem based thinking and track the core revenue metrics like, are we booking more qualified meetings? Are we closing more deals? Is our revenue growing? Is our retention growing? And is everything trending up? If it's not, we'll do deep dives. And attribution has a role in that in terms of like trying to pull together an understanding or a theory of what's happening. But it's not like a written in stone playbook that you can say, oh, this happened because of this.
Yeah, but I mean, listen, you said attribution, and you said it 3 times, and I'll repeat it, is a lie that's been sold to you by the tech vendor who's got whatever kind of built-in metric equation going on where they could dashboard it for you and show you that this is being successful or this is not being successful or you need to focus here or focus there. I get that, right? At the end of the day, right, we want to know as salespeople, as companies, we want to know where's the revenue coming from so that we can focus our efforts there. Who cares? So it doesn't matter if you know the minute the lead comes in or after you close the deal, right? Because when you're closing the deal or when you closed the deal and you have an onboarding period, sure, they may not remember exactly how they came because it could be 6 months down the road already at this point, but at least then you can look back at the sales track and what had happened, and then maybe you could still say, okay, well, this is really what made this deal successful, this is what made this deal unsuccessful, and then take that feedback back to marketing or sales and iterate your motion to reflect, where those wins could come from. Again, it's not like we're so. I think that the biggest problem that I've had, and again, maybe this is something that comes with my age and my generation, we have a little bit more maybe patience, I don't know, or maybe wherewithal. We've been, like I've had jobs that are 10 years. I worked for a company for 9 years. I worked for another company for 6 years. I worked for another company for 4 years, right?
Yeah.
I don't see that today. You know what I see in resumes and profiles? 3 months, 8 months there, a year there, 6 months there, especially in the last few years, right? And even some of the older crowd, who've been in the game since 2012, 2011, they a year and a half here, 2 years here, and like I don't even look anymore because I'll go to their profile and how it only shows like the first 3 businesses you were in, and then it says see 35 other experiences. I'm like, I'm not looking at that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like half of them are contract work anyway. And so that's the problem, right? The problem, well, that's part of the problem too, is because who cares about attribution? Who cares where it came from? That person who initiated that lead is probably not going to be here in 6 months.
Yeah.
So why are they so worried? Like why, it's funny, they're worried. The culture is that like, I want to get paid, I want to get the commission for it, or I want to get bonused off of it. But if they look at it as an ecosystem, like you're saying, and everybody's like on the same team, and then maybe, look, there's a concept in the restaurant business called pooling tips. Right?
Yeah.
You ever heard of that?
Yeah. Not that we do tips over here, but when I lived over there, I benefited from that.
It's the same concept, right? And you're going to still have the infighting. I believe that once we create some kind of holistic kind of pod kind of setup or something like that, which I preached to Adam last week too. I think it's going to be a long time before marketing thinks they're like, you got to admit, marketing people are salespeople. They just sell differently.
They have to be.
And salespeople are marketing people. They just don't have a creative, design gene where they can make a nice. But you want to know something though? How do you make those pieces of copy? you have to be communicating with the sales team and learning from the sales team what is the language that the prospect is talking and speaking,
Yeah.
right? We need to use that. Like when I set a meeting, like I'm in sales agency too, right? And I
Yep.
work for a company, and the company sells a software to a like heavy industrial equipment companies, right? And they, you know, a lot of these companies already have a system, you know, it's very much like everybody else, or they're just converting over to something, right? So
Mm.
it's got its challenges, but it's like they don't like, so if I'm approaching that customer, right, and I learn that this is a common way to refer to this, right? You know, this is very common in the industry. Like I even had trade guys say to me, "Oh, you don't know that? That's very common in this industry." No, I actually I don't. I appreciate learning about that.
Mm.
And what does that actually mean? You know, like what does that mean to you? You know, and so now I can take that little nugget, if you will, and I can go to my marketing team and say, hey, let's add this to one of those landing pages. Let's add this to one of our display campaigns. You know, we
Mm.
always are going over that. We're constantly doing that. And when I sit down with a client, I'll ask them after every discovery call, like when we do our weekly business review and we go over all the calls that I set, the very first question we ask every time he goes, okay, you know, we had this meeting on Monday, and he starts to tell me how it went, right? So this is the VP of sales, right, giving me the feedback from the rep. And we've actually instructed those guys with 3 basic questions to ask the rep, so that we can get the proper feedback, so we can iterate on the phone or in our marketing copy, right? And that is, what was the pain, right?
Mm.
But what was the pain in their language? Not what we think it is, but what did they
Yeah.
say it is, right? What was the terms they used about their workflows and their company and their industry, right? And we take that information and we give that feedback back to marketing so they can adjust the copy. I don't think that happens naturally the way it should in
Yeah.
most companies.
I found that as well. And it has been for me a competitive advantage because I have that sales experience. So like when we're running ads, for example, for a client, I'll pick up the phone and call leads. I'll jump on calls. I'll sit in on sales meetings and stuff so
I
that
love it.
not only can I learn, but help the client close deals as well. Like last month, I helped a client close a 120K retainer contract with a big client just because they were like I was able to jump on and because I had some extra understanding, help communicate and move that across. And from a marketing side, like I feel I always want to talk with sales. Like that was what I learned in that. So in that, call it like the golden era, that golden goose business that we had. Like it was probably one of the other reasons they wanted to switch to a subscription model because I was making a lot of cash from from
Yeah,
that.
I
Like
understand.
so that was my first like 7-figure year from a sales commission perspective, and um, the thing that helped facilitate that was me playing that pivot role. And like I would go and talk to the marketing guy and say, hey, this is what I learned on the calls, this is what people are saying, this is who's being attracted to the current marketing you're putting out there. Maybe we should say more of this because our best prospects seem to resonate with this part of the message. And then same with customer success, when I would sign someone and if there was potentially a difficult person, etc., and the founder was doing customer success, so it was easy to communicate with him. I would talk to him and he'd be like, hey man, this person uh, it's been difficult because of this reason, or this person's really great because of this reason, this reason. So then I knew in the sales call to frame things in certain ways and improve the quality of the people I'm knocking through. So now when I'm actually facilitating the marketing side for like clients in this case, I feel like I'm flying blind if I'm not getting that feedback from sales.
Right.
Because I don't care about lead cost or how many leads we've put through or MQLs, etc. Uh, I just care about are they the right fit?
Right.
Because if they're not, the message that we're putting out on the front end is obviously resonating with the wrong people. And how am I going to know that if I don't know who's actually being spoken to on the other side?
The other problem too, right? I mean, we spend a lot of marketing dollars on, oftentimes on very generic marketing, kind of broad
Mm.
stroke marketing, even though because we're trying to appeal, maybe early, we're talking about early stage, right? Because we're trying to appeal to, maybe a couple of different sectors and see really where our strengths are going to ultimately lie. I think there's a huge difference between obviously a mature company and a startup, of course, but the challenge, I think that again, with respect to that that feedback loop, right, is I just don't think that sales and marketing teams or leaders understand how to bridge that gap from a communication perspective. Like they don't speak the same language, right? Like first of all, tech sales in general has got a ridiculous language. That's why half the people in the world can't get into the industry, because they think they don't understand what we're talking about. Because what's really ironic about that, as you know, is that every single acronym has like instead of customer acquisition, instead of CAC, right, in our industry, in the sales tech world or whatever, tech sales world, you go over to where I used to work in building products and they call it customer acquisition cost.
Yeah. Or cost per acquisition and all these different jargon words.
They don't acronym it so that we have no idea what you're talking about, right? They just tell you what it is, like what we're talking about, like actual annual contract value. Like I don't say ACV, total addressable market. Maybe they don't even use that term, right? But the point is that like I think there's a language barrier. I think that like we have these companies, we build these sales teams, we build these marketing teams, and then we have a meeting, right? But nobody knows how to talk within the meeting in a structure that actually makes that data flow properly between the two groups, right? And they're speaking different languages, and it's usually just a review. Usually when marketing and sales get together in a meeting, it's oftentimes very much just about review of the leads, right? Where they came from. Oh, what happened with those MQLs? What happened with these SQLs? That's not what the meeting should be about. That's why we have CRM. That's why we have stages in CRM, to tell everybody where it's at, and the notes section, right? Those meetings should be that feedback loop, should be the time when you talk about what did you hear on the phone, or what are you seeing coming back through the questionnaires. Let's just say maybe you're putting out questionnaires, maybe you're putting out some questionnaire through their website and they fill it out, right? What's coming back from you? What are they saying? What's the trends that you're seeing? Do you see them drop, like even just the stuff about, oh well, we get something through the website and then they book the time but then they no show, right? Okay, why? Let's see let's figure out why together, right? So that maybe the copy up front could be a bit stronger or more clear. Like I can't tell you how many times we've had some of our clients have had people sign up for demos, and then you get them on the phone because they no showed and they don't even remember.
And that happens all the time. Like a client recently was dealing with that, and I remember in my sales days, I consulted to a company that was going through a similar issue, where they kind of just made it so easy for someone to just book a call in terms of, and I always relate it to like dating. So like if a guy or a girl is super easy to get, there's like no thrill in the chase, so to speak. So what we implemented for that company, which completely flipped the no-show rates around, was just getting them to actually complete a form before they booked the call. And it would have, if this form is not completed within 24 hours of your scheduled appointment, it will be canceled, because we need to understand where you're coming from to make this time valuable. Something along those lines. And just the sheer fact of someone filling out a form that asked a few questions before they could book a call completely changed the show-up rates, because now they were actually invested into it, versus just like, oh, this is interesting, click, click, click. Then 2 days later they forget, which I've done. Like I've woken up some morning, especially with like US companies, and time zone's obviously an issue. And I wake up and I'm going through my morning. I'm like, oh crap, I booked that call, and I no-show them just because I forget.
Oh, you did? Oh, yeah. I didn't know what you meant.
So
that's awesome.
It's just something that happens. Whereas I've found like if you actually get emotional buy-in or time buy-in, like the whole sunk cost fallacy from prospects, and do make not make it like too challenging. Like you don't want to make it an entire series of hoops for them to jump through, but at least have a couple of steps that they need to go through before they can book time in a salesperson's calendar, because that time's valuable. Then they will not only remember it because they've invested time, energy, effort into getting that meeting, um, but they'll be more invested in sticking it out and possibly pursuing that avenue of solution because of the sunk cost fallacy. Well, I've put 10 minutes into this, I might as well show up and hear what they're about.
Yeah, exactly. Well, also too, right? Like what's been the challenge, and this of course growth at all costs model, right? Like is what was going on for many years with the setting meetings, right? And then the biggest challenge, the biggest problem with setting meetings that don't stick is the time wasted just following up and trying to reschedule it, right? And then the poor process by which you're trying to reschedule it, right? And the only way to really avoid that whole nonsense is to make sure that you're setting up better meetings, or not to set up the call just at an all cost, growth at all cost mentality, right? Like you don't have to set that meeting today.
Yeah.
Right? It may not be ready. They may not be ready to have a meaningful conversation today. Doesn't mean there's not an opportunity there. You want to live to call another day. Don't burn your bridge. Read the room, whatever cliche phrase you want to say, right? Like you just have to understand that, you're just gonna burn it if you do it that way. If you think like, I just got to get tons of meetings. Now, for us on the agency side, it's even more critical, right? Because one of the biggest challenges for agencies these days, and I think it's continuing, and unless the model changes a little bit, it'd be very difficult to. But these agencies are not the marketing agencies, more of like the SDR type agencies. They're tasked with getting meetings too, right? And we do try to do a tremendous job on obviously working with them to understand the pains and all that kind of stuff. But the biggest challenge is at the end of the day, if they don't close any deals, now they're just going to say, "Oh, you didn't get us enough meetings, or you didn't get us enough qualified meetings," right? And that's okay, right? We get it. We realize that could happen, but the idea is to have a relationship where you can dig into those things and get better and better and get better meetings as you go on. But how do you help them sell better, right? That's always the challenge, right? And we get involved in that by giving them these like little things to chew on. Hey, listen, when Mr. VP of Sales, when you get all the data for these meetings that we're going to talk about at the end of the week business review, what we really want to know is this. We want to know what was the real pain. What did that pain cause? Did that cause actually attrition, or did that cause a loss of revenue, or did that cause, whatever it caused? Like, what are those pains that we can then use, obviously, in our talk track and in our marketing material, right? But that's the challenge, is that the SDR is always going to be the one that's looked at as saying that meeting wasn't good enough, right?
Yeah.
Well, I set it up for you. Now, let's say the meeting is a no-show, like we're talking about, right? What is this SDR supposed to do? He just set the meeting, and sometimes those growth at all cost models will sound something like this, right? Hey, John, my name's Mark. How's it going today? Excellent, great. Yeah, I saw you're in charge of events, right? Well, I work with a lot of people, and a lot of the events that they have, they tell me that they're juggling a lot of platforms. It's very difficult to manage. Sometimes they're using multiple platforms to communicate, and they wish they had it kind of centralized. And I was curious if anything like that's going on, or not that. They'll say something like, we hear this is all the thing, and I believe we discovered. Oh, this is it. Yeah, I believe we discovered a breakthrough on how to improve XYZ. And I'd love to share that with you. What's your calendar look like? I mean, it's like the opener, right? What's your calendar look like for a Tuesday at 3? Now, the person heard breakthrough. They heard similar company. They heard, a breakthrough. Oh, interesting. I'm always looking. Oh, sure. I'll take that call. Right. Yeah. Tuesday at 3. Oh, that's work. And then they hang up.
Yeah.
Right. No pain identified. No reason to meet except that it's a great idea, maybe. Right. Yeah, and the great idea is good. It can work, right? But what they could have done better was then, hey, so now tell me, before you jump off, and then you ask a couple of questions and see, right? And like we would then qualify it there. And then at the end of the 2 or 3 questions, I'd say something like, what Well, it sounds like we actually will have a very meaningful conversation. So look out for my email, my invite, and blah, 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 right? Now,
Yeah.
let's just say for argument's sake, they no-show, right? Even on that poor excuse of a meeting set by giving them the breakthrough pitch,
Yeah.
it's like I got some information afterwards, but some don't. Some will just hang up. And this is the ramifications of that. Now they no-show, right? And now what do? Right? Your boss is going to go, well, why were we to meet? Why were we supposed to meet? And you're sitting there going, I don't know why we were supposed to meet. They liked my
Yeah.
pitch. Oh, they liked what I had to say. Oh, great.
Like,
Now you got to go back to them, and most of the time that follow-up sounds something like, hey, John, it's Mark over at whatever. Hey, just circling back with you, see if we can reschedule. And
yeah.
then the person will start to give them the runaround.
Mm.
Oh, I actually I can't talk right now. Let me check my calendar. I'll get back to you. Right?
Yeah.
Something like
So
that.
much
Right?
on.
Or any of those kinds of things. And so now what do you have? You have nothing to point to, right? But if you identify a pain, if you understand that there's something wrong in that person's environment and that you might be able to help them, now at the very least, when they no-show, you can say, hey, John, let me ask you, maybe you forgot, because 9 times out of 10 they forget, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm always like this. Did you forget? Did you forget why we were going to meet, John? That's okay, man. Just let me know. And they
Yeah.
go, oh, yeah, I kind of, yeah. They don't want to admit it, but I'll get them to admit it. I'll push them. I'll be like, did you forget why we were supposed to meet? And they're
Yeah.
like, yeah. They're like, can you remind me? You know,
And
and then we'll go back into it. And then you know, if the pain is there and you identified it initially, you're probably going to
yeah.
get that meeting back on the calendar. But if it's not there and it was just a good idea, nobody has time for good ideas.
No, and there's a couple of big gaps there or challenges. One with the entire model, like the growth at all cost model, but even a skill gap as well, because it's often what not just from the booking sales agency world, but marketing agency world, and that's why I don't like necessarily conflating myself with them, because a lot of the time they will sell the X plus X plus X equals Y formula. All you need to do is spend X amount of dollars on ads, you'll get X amount of leads, get X amount of calls, X amount of sales, and it will equal X amount of revenue. So run this strategy with us and you'll be rich. And then 3 months in, nothing's working. And they're like, what the hell? And they're like, oh, we're still in the learning phase. We're still learning. So they set all these crazy expectations. But like one of the worst ones is when marketing agencies, and this will tie into that first job that I had, they'll run like low intent lead gen models, etc. And they'll get hundreds of leads coming through. The leads will be cheap. And then they'll say to the company, well, your sales team just sucks. Like we're getting you all these leads. Look how cheap they are. Your sales team just sucks. But then you look at the front end messaging, like what they're trying to attract people with, and it's in complete contrast to what a qualified prospect, what a qualified lead that sales would actually value wants, because they're trying to be too very mass appealing. Now, sometimes there is a skill gap on the sales side, and that's where my experience in sales can help, because if a client, for example, is having challenges on the sales side, I can jump on the phones and pick up the phones and book meetings and test how qualified and quality these leads are. But marketing agencies don't do that and just focus on getting the most leads for the cheapest cost. And this happens internally as well. Yes, you can have some results for that. So for the first company that I worked at, that's the model they ran, the low intent lead gen model. They would run ebooks, white papers, etc. on the front end, and get a ton of leads in for a cheap cost. Now, me as a young naive, like my first sales job, my young naive seller, I had 50 meetings to book plus, or 50 minimum per week, plus I had to get 80% show rate. So do you think
50 a week?
50 a week, 10 a day I had to book,
Oh my God.
which I always hit. I averaged around like 56, so I always went a little bit above and beyond, which sort of ties to, I'll bring this in the hump day a bit later, but but I wasn't necessarily concerned with, is this person necessarily right? Well, one, there was no criteria. It was just like book anyone in you can. But so I would book these people in. I would get them to show, because I would build rapport with them. The conversations would go for anywhere from like 15 to 20 minutes. And so make the outbound cold call, break the ice, get through it, build rapport, show a bit of a gap, get them interested, and then pedestal the third party, because I was booking for other sellers then, pedestal that person so that they're excited to show up, and then I would have my own follow-up process to make sure they did show up. And I hit my numbers, 50, like average 56. Over my average show up rate was over 80% as well. So I always got my commissions, and the sales did double. So the first month that I went there, they went from an average of 20 odd sales to I think it was like 42 or 43. So we basically doubled the sales volumes just by me jumping in and playing that setting role. But all sounds great on paper, all sounds good in theory. But
if they churn
on those clients was horrendous, because the message on the front end was super vague, super wide. So I was getting just a variety of people that were, some a right fit, some not a right fit. But because I had high numbers, I'll just book whoever was willing to take a meeting. I'll book them in and make sure they showed up. And then the salespeople, because they were incentivized and KPI'd on how many closes, they would say whatever they need to say to close a deal.
What was the average contract value though, like or monthly recurring revenue charge?
Average 20K ARR. So
20,000 a year. Wow.
20,000 a year. So reasonable investment. For most of the time it was with like early stage startups or like quite small companies. So 20K is like still a reasonable investment for them. And then they would get onto the back end, and then customer success are in damage control all day, because a few weeks goes by, like we don't have the resources to facilitate what was promised, and they were oversold, etc. So then there was huge churn on the back end. So even though it doubled the sales on the front end, it amplified the churn on the back end. And then what the other repercussion of that was the burnout of the sales team. So in 2 years, I was there for nearly 18 months, but over 2 years, they went through 4 sales teams. So when I went from booking, the meetings to moves to the sales side, the entire rest of the team quit. So it was just me again. So I had to book my own meetings, had to do my own sales and do everything because they didn't hire another me to book appointments. But what was funny?
Well, now they could just build now they can build a Sam Shaper bot right next to you and make it, run it side by side.
And what the funny repercussion, which is what kind of like started triggering the light bulbs to me as to like that model doesn't work, is now that I was the only person there, like it was obviously unrealistic for me to hit the same KPIs that an entire team was hitting. So they were just like, just do your best. Like just like we're in a transition point, just do your best, close what you can. And I outperformed, not an entire team, but on an individual level, outperformed the rest of the previous team by quite a way. And my retention on those clients was way higher. Not because I was like some superstar salesperson that was just miles better than the previous team, but because I was now had no pressure in terms of I need to hit 50 bookings or I need to hit 10 sales or whatever. I only booked in people that were a right fit, that I knew would be a relatively smooth close, like they had the need there. And then when they closed, they actually had a good experience with the company because they needed what they weren't oversold. So me as my solo self being just more selective, outperformed a previous team because I was just more selective. So then it kind of like made the light bulb of, it doesn't actually matter how many sales, it's the quality of the sale.
Well, let me ask you this, because I'm a conversationalist, right? And so I always point to the fact that you just treated those interactions as a data curation event, an effort to find out, do these people have a problem? Is it a problem that I can solve? Is it a problem that they want to solve today? Does it warrant a conversation right now? Right? When you find that person who actually has a problem and is looking for something, and I've run into it, I just have good timing, right? Sometimes you have that, and they haven't even gone out to market yet. And so maybe now, so you're really not in an inbound situation. If you waited 3 weeks, they probably wouldn't have come inbound to you. They're going to probably go to half a dozen other software companies that they find on Google, because we're not paying $1 million for that front page lead, right? And so what do you do, right? So you happen to get that person. you happen to get lucky. The problem we have is there's this other, and Adam and I talked about this last week, there's this other 21% that you can capture, or that you can attract, if you will, in the market that's not in market, but will respond to, for lack of a better way to say, demand generation advertising or marketing.
Yeah.
So they see something, they get, maybe, like, there's this thing that there's only so many, some people aren't aware that they have the problem. They don't think it's a problem.
Awareness, the problem, unaware.
Like, for example, like we sell, I work for, one of my clients sells, like I told you, heavy equipment software, right?
Yeah.
There are people that I talk to every day, and I ask them, I tell them, I illuminate a problem for them. I say, oh, I'm working with another team, and, you know, they have a system on the front end that doesn't talk to the back end, and so there's a lot of disconnect. There's a lot of report building going on that doesn't really shouldn't be. There's a lot of rekeying, manual rekeys, and all this kind of stuff. And they say, oh no, we don't have any of those problems. And I said, oh well, tell me how you guys process your work orders, right? And the guy goes, I send an email with a PDF writer through, and they access a SharePoint file or something like that, right? And oh, okay, he goes, it's digital. Right? Like, and they're using Outlook to schedule, and they're using, like, so there's no application, no piece of software that sort of manages the whole process, right? But they think it works. They think it's digital. They think it's great, right? Now, if I can create some, whether it's on the phone or it's maybe through programmatic display campaigns, or it's, you know, some kind of advertisement to this person and wherever he may be on Amazon.com or otherwise. And now he's like, oh yeah, you know, that's right. That is a challenge. That is a problem. I never really thought about it that way, you know, or something like that. Now there's some illumination. There's a spark in them, and say, oh, maybe we should look into this, right? Now they have a conversation with their leadership team, and they run into the same problem again. They realize they haven't fixed it. You know, now it's like, oh, I got this email. You know, that's the greatest thing about, like, when you send an email to, like, the C-suite, and you send it to everybody in the C-suite, and it's illuminating a problem that you know specifically that they have, and, you know, they're going to have a board meeting, or they're going to have a meeting, and you know what's going to happen in that meeting? And Patrick William Joyce will tell you, he'll tell you a really great story. I can't personally say this happened to me, but it has happened. I just haven't heard the story, and he actually was told the story that he had sent like 5-6 emails to everybody in the C-suite, and they were literally in a meeting, and the problem came up, and one guy said, oh, I got this email from, you know, this guy Pat, and telling me this, and everybody in the room was like, so did I. We got to get that guy in here. Like, you know, because they're like, there must be something about it. This guy reached out to all of us, right? And so that's demand generation, right? And to a certain degree, getting people to maybe think about solving a problem that they have. They know they have it. Maybe they've been ignoring it. Maybe it hasn't been a priority. Maybe we tell them on the phone something like, you know, a previous like we just had a company we solved an issue for. They had a $2 million warranty leakage, they call it, right? So basically what that is it's like they go do a warranty job, and they don't send the information to the OEM in time to get actually paid back, and they eat it, right? Now, $100, $1,000, $2,000, $2 million leakage, that's a problem. Granted, it's a $60 million company, so they maybe, you know, that still maybe, I still think that's not nominal. I think that's pretty extensive. You know, it's still like almost 15%, or like 6%, whatever the number is, right? But like, it's still a lot. Like, it's like $2 million. Like, you know, so if our software can actually save a company, and then the guy starts thinking, I have that too. I don't have 2 million, but shit, we got 200,000. What does your system do that can save me that 200,000? Because 200,000 with interest, I can do a lot with. If I can get that back, right? So now you're solving a real problem that he didn't really think he could solve, that person, right? And so now you're generating demand for your product, and that's a huge difference than trying to capture that 2%. And I think marketing was always seen as that people who were trying to figure out how to grab that 3% or maybe even influence the other 90. And sales doesn't give a shit. Sales is just calling everybody,
Yeah.
right? And there's no there's no
Yeah,
strategy, right?
definitely.
And they're just calling everybody, and and you just get lucky if you happen to find somebody in the window, it's very
Yeah, and
rare.
when you have a small team like that, that experience I shared just then, like I didn't I had no idea about the buyer's pyramid or these stages of awareness. I just knew that I had fuck all time in the day, so I couldn't book meetings with just anyone. I needed to find good people, otherwise I was going to make no commission. So it was self incentivized, but then it based on because the marketing budget shrank as well. So obviously there were, because it was just me, there was less leads coming in, but also those typically from an ads perspective, especially social ads, which they were running, there's when your budget is smaller, Facebook in their case will isolate into a smaller audience, and it will try and look for a more ready to purchase audience, the people that are indicating later stages of intent. But then when you flood more dollars into that, it pushes it out into a wider audience. So when they rehired a new team, um, my performance dropped, everyone's performance dropped, because all of a sudden again the system was just being flooded with all these ebook leads,
Yeah.
and everyone was just trying to book meetings for the sake of booking meetings. The people that weren't aware, and that's when it all kind of went pear shaped for them. Whereas now, like as to Adam's point in generating demand, and there's obviously the debate of like, do SDRs belong in sales or in marketing, etc. Um, there's obviously times where you would, if you've got a one-person sales team or a founder-led sales, probably starting with some sort of capturing demand function that does start off and try to validate that you have a message or offer that people actually want, is a good place to start. But as soon as you try and scale that out, and I see this like from an ads perspective, for example, uh, companies will get a certain level of spend and it will perform really well, and then they hit a cap and they go, oh,
Yep.
our ads suck, or
Yeah.
we can't scale any higher. Then they scrap those ads, they start again, hit the same ceiling, and because they're just always trying to capture demand versus trying to generate demand and be present in the market. And that's where the ecosystem effect comes in, as to if you are being more present in the market, if you're being more present with a good message, then theoretically you should see everything lift in terms of inbound inquiries. Your SDRs success rate should be higher, closing rate should be higher, everything should lift because of the presence and the message.
Yeah, and the message it's got to sound the same all the way through. This was the
Yeah.
point. Like when sometimes, like, I used to think that email, I was always challenged by email. I did it even though I got abysmal open rates and reply rates, and
Mhm.
mostly, even when I had great reply rates, they were mostly take me off your list. I think what people don't realize, and again, it's interesting you mentioned the whole, like, technology companies sort of pushing an agenda, that people wind up buying into. This is similarly in that, like, um, I lost my train of thought. I got thrown off there for a second.
Yeah, I think I sort of get where you're going. Like it's the whole spray and pray sort of method of
Yeah,
no,
you
and
can't.
sort of doing the reverse of what Adam obviously talks about, like cataloging the market, doing some research, making some relevance. They just take a blanket templated email, spray it around to everyone, and
Oh, I
then they
know.
see what are those response rates, what are this, etc. You go.
Yeah, and so the email, right? And so marketing and email, right? Like, so when you have the messaging uniform across everybody, the way we talk about it, the way we text about it, the way we send a campaign display, and the words are similar. So, like, for me, right? I'll call up a customer or I'll call up a prospect. This has happened, and I don't think email's working, right? I think, oh, I have these abysmal rates. This is where I was going at, right? I have
Yeah.
these abysmal rates, and they're not really, maybe they're not being seen, maybe it's going to spam, and all these other companies, I don't remember what I was saying, all these other companies that with this technology saying you have to do it this way so that you land in the inbox, right? I know now it may be warranted at some companies that have very large teams and they're sending out, even if a single rep is only sending 20 or 30 emails a day, if they got 200 reps, that's thousands of emails going out under that domain. So having domain rotations and all that kind of stuff is probably necessary, right?
Yeah.
I believe that that's necessary at that level. But maybe at the level I'm at, the way I send emails and the way we're working, it's not that massive. But what I know is even though I don't get a reply rate or I don't get opens or whatever it is, I know that they're being effective. Why? Because I've set meetings with people or I've been in conversation with somebody and I use the same language that's in the copy, in the text of the email, in the campaign display, in the display campaign, in the marketing component pieces. I'm using the same language, right? So what happens to that prospect while I'm talking to him, now I got him live and he's like, he's listening to me and he's probably shaking his head and he's like, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it sounds familiar. Like in his head, he's like, it sounds familiar. I don't know what. And so we go through the motions. I ask him a question. He comes back. I pitch a time. He accepts the time, right? Now he says, wait a minute. Did you send me an email? Because now I say the company name, right? That's the other thing too. I don't know if you caught any of my recent content, but one of the biggest habits that everybody has is they'll say, hey, I'm Sam Shaper from Shapers OS. That's immediately. That's you just say it like that. Whatever the other companies that you work for, you probably said, hey, it's Sam from wherever. It's Sam from this. It's a habit that people can't break. But let me tell you something. If you can break that habit of using your company name aside your real name, you will have longer conversations. I guarantee it. I do, and I say this every day. Every time I make a phone call, I say, hey, Sam, this is Mark. I say, hey, Sam, it's Marc Mac. How's it going today? Oh, it's going great, Mark. How's it going with you? Every single time. I don't get hung up on, right? Some people get hung up on. You say, hey, this is Sam Shaper from Shapers OS. Click.
Yeah.
They didn't hang up on you. They hung up on Shapers OS. They don't want to talk to a company. They want to talk to a person, right? And as soon as you say you're so-and-so from so-and-so, you take away your humanity almost. You're making yourself, in their head, they're like, as soon as somebody says that to me on a call, I'm like, okay, what are you going to tell me?
What are you going
to, I might listen. It might be intriguing. You could have a great pitch. I'm not saying I'm hanging up, but there's that box that I put you in immediately. But when I say, hey, Sam, it's Marc Mac. How's it going? And you're like, oh, it's going fine. You don't think anything of my name. You just remember it because I just introduced you. You don't think I'm a company. You don't think I'm trying to sell you something. You might be curious about who are you and why are you calling, and that's fair. That's fine. I'm going to tell you, right? And so the next thing I'll say after they say that, I'll say, oh, thanks. No, thanks for asking. Actually, you don't know me, but I was calling for a specific reason. Now I might throw a PBO in and say, do you have a quick sec? Yeah. Okay. No. Or I might change it and I'll say, you don't know me, but I was calling for a specific reason. Are you still with Shapers OS? Oh, okay, great. Yeah, sorry. So many people have changed jobs in the last few years. Now, it's 35 seconds I'm into the call, right? And they haven't hung up yet. And they're working with me and they're talking to me and it's soft, right? And so the idea is all of a sudden they're like, why is he talking to me? And I say, hey, I've been working with some of these companies and this is what I'm hearing. And then they're like, that's interesting. Yeah. I think I heard that before. Where do I know that from? Oh, and then I booked the meeting and then they go, did you send me an email recently? Or or they'll say something like in the mid-sentence, they'll go, yeah, no, this is a topic. I actually got an email the other day, maybe from one of your guys or something, and something about this kind of stuff, right? Yeah, it was me, man. That was an email I did send you. Thank you. So that's how I know it's working. Right? The channel is working, but it's not working by itself. And that's why marketing and sales needs to get together because they don't work independent of each other. They only work together. Right?
And that with the growth at all cost model, it kind of ties into what we were talking about previously with silos. Like I always say to clients and to others, like it's like a good book, right? Like from cover to back, it should make sense as to why I'm reading this. If I pulled this book open on deep selling and Harry Potter's in here, I'm going to be like, what the fuck? Like, it makes no sense.
What is that book? I've never seen that. Deep selling? Maybe we should talk
Graham,
about it.
Shout out to Graham. Where is it? Graham Hawkins' new book. So Graham's a good friend of mine over here and sales leader. Probably worth having on here at some point.
Yeah, we've been introduced.
Yeah, definitely connect. Or grab a copy of his new book. But with that book, if I opened it and it's got something completely different in it, I'm going to switch off. And that's, I think, the trap that sometimes when you, and Graham does talk about this, where you incentivize the wrong behaviors, the wrong teams to not work together. Like when marketing are incentivized just to get MQLs, you need to hit 1,000 leads this month or whatever. They're going to put things in there that are going to get leads. But that doesn't necessarily mean, so they'll try clickbait, they'll try giving free stuff away, etc. Paying people to have meetings, $100 voucher to have a meeting, shit like that.
Oh, I hate that.
And yes,
Fucking
worst idea ever. But then
I'll do it.
sales are then obviously incentivized to book, or SDRs are then incentivized to book meetings, which regardless of like I was 50 meetings a week, doesn't matter if they're in market or if they're actually looking for it, you just need to book meetings. So I'm going to book meetings because I need to hit the number. So everyone's numbers are now not only siloed, but they're all hindering each other because they're self-incentivized to keep their own jobs. Whereas, as you were saying just then, like if the book reads the same from the front end, from marketing, as in the message that's being out there, the message that's going out through email, the message that SDRs are communicating through calls, and then the message that leads down to sales, everyone's singing from the same hymn sheet, and all of a sudden prospects are like, oh, like they all sound the same. I'm on the call because I heard this. And now because you can track the trends and draw a correlation, not causation. When we're all saying this, the quality of meetings goes up, the conversion rates go up, the quality of our clients go up.
And you can replicate that.
Yeah.
Right. You can't replicate, like, we don't know where it came from, this attribution thing, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry. You go.
No, I was going to say, it's just an amazing thing when you actually all are on the same page. What do you think about, look, all right, so I've worked a couple of jobs where in the past where, some of them were commission and bonus. Some of them were, salary, commission or whatever, but then there was like I'm not going to say a profit sharing, but it was more like if the company hit this revenue goal, they would pay out a bonus to everybody. And then depending on your tenure, right, you would get different numbers, so like, I literally was there for a month and I got $1,000.
Like cha-ching.
I was like, holy, that's awesome. Right. And but of course, like my boss, he got $10,000 or $5,000, whatever it was, right? Is that perhaps a bonus structure of the company hitting a revenue goal? Be a better, maybe a strategy of merit? First thing I think of, and I'm sure you probably thought of it as soon as I said it, is how is that fair if we don't hit the revenue goal as a company, yet I hit my goal as a sales rep? So I'm not going to get my bonus because the whole company as a whole didn't hit their goal. So I lose. Is that really where it breaks down? Or is the culture change to, hey, we're a team, right? If we're not profitable, if we don't make revenue, we hit this revenue number, which equates to our profitability goals, then, if I paid you commission up front, I'd now be in the red.
Yeah. And not that I've seen many models for this. And I talked to Graham about it quite a bit because he has a gripe with, obviously, like the main incentive structures that are in place for sales and marketing is not always in alignment with buyers and what buyers want. And like that first company I worked at was kind of a epitome of that example. Like my incentive structure was just to get meetings. So I just booked meetings whenever I could, regardless of quality. The sales team's incentive was to close deals, so they got commissions. So they would close deals and maybe go in the gray areas of truth and overinflate things at times to get deals across the line. And then customer success had to deal with the ramifications of that. And that then also ties into like what you're saying with the siloed efforts of, say in the marketing world, does the Facebook team get a bonus? Does Google get a bonus, etc.? How do we then separate that out? Versus like, if we're all singing the same song, we're all in the same message, all of these channels, email, Google, etc., are just distribution channels for the same message. So as a team, we work on the message, then we just push it out through the channels. Who cares where it comes from? And then sales on their side, I've seen, like, for me personally, for this company, like, I would never hire a commission-based salesperson, because I know the difficulties of delivery on the back end of if they sell the wrong person. So my incentive, and it might vary from company to company, but the incentive structure I will be putting in place will be around retention and holding your own book of clients. So when and you get rewarded based on your own book. Whereas
think
then,
about
like,
this. Think about this. Like if you have a book of business, then you could, it's repeat business, right? They have, so that's
just
the,
hold the book.
and you can actually, if you have that, right, you can scale because you can hire reps who can then come in and maybe even start out servicing some customers that are already there, so they can learn how these, right, they can learn how the product works for them. They can learn, like, I always thought that was interesting. Like when I worked for a couple of building products companies, I ran, I came into the company, the territory, it was a territory, right? So there were accounts in the territory. It was worth 700 grand, right? It did 700,000 a year before I came in, right? The year that I took it over, my first year, I did like $1.2 million, which was incredible. But the territory had been kind of dormant. Like there was no one working it for about 9 months. So even though it did 700,000 a year before, all I had to do was put in some effort, and I was going to crush that number, right? And so but mind you, I was there 8 years, and I made President's Club 3 years in a row. But like, there's always that exponential growth that you have to have, right? Like you were saying, like you couldn't do as much as the sales team, one person versus 5 people, but you did probably what looked like the work of multiple people, because just the nature of, the end result, because you were focused so much on quality as opposed to quantity.
The right action.
That's the culture across the industry that you have to start to develop, is that it's a quality thing, because the downstream effects is churn, right? And what's crazy though, when we talked about like, oh, who should be getting credit if it was a kind of a bonus model, think about the customer success team. They probably make more money for the company than the actual sales reps and the marketing people, because think about it, like a sales rep, like if I'm an SDR and like say I set a meeting, I didn't close the deal, all I did is got interest, start a conversation. My AE then has like 19 meetings and he closes the deal, right? But he closes the deal for a pilot. Now I don't mean a pilot that's not paid, but like pilot, meaning like they're going to roll out 15 users instead of 500.
Little test run.
So they roll out 15 users, right? Now, I don't know, I've never been on the AE side in a software company, but I would assume that carries with it a certain MRR that I'm going to get commissioned off of, or an ARR that I'm going to get commissioned off of, and then it's going to get amortized down to my monthly pay, whatever. But that's just for those 15 users, right? What happens when customer success and customer service takes over, customer support, and they're working the account, and 15 or whatever, 3 months later, they see that it's working and it's working great. And now all of a sudden, that conversation that the customer success person is having and keeping the relationship and building the real relationship, because I'll say this and I'll preach this from the rooftops, that a relationship is not started or even solidified until an actual transaction occurs. Okay, everything else is rapport building, right? You're building rapport up to the point where you can get them to sign a contract. Now your relationship begins, because now you have to get intimate with them, right?
Now you're married.
And so customer success gets intimate, right? And now all of a sudden they sell 400 users. What are they getting bonus? They're commissioned off of.
Yeah.
You think it reflects the same as if the sales rep had originally opened the deal and closed 400 right from the get? Probably not. Is that sales rep going to get that commission on those 400 users? Probably not. It's probably different now because they've already, and I, again, I don't have the experience in a software company to know, because I've always just been top of funnel. But I think that there's the money, right? The retention. And I'll add this last thing. You said it. It's funny. They had ARR. They had this amount ARR, but they closed within 9 months, right? They went to market to get funding, and they were telling investors and VCs that they have $6 million in ARR, but they've only been around 3 months. How does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you haven't collected it yet, it's not $6 million ARR. I'm sorry. It's just not. It's definitely not ARR, because that's annual recurring revenue, and you'd have to literally sign another year contract in order to even say that you can get $100,000 ARR, or whatever it is, $20,000 ARR. MRR is not a term if you sign a contract for 3 months. Yeah. So for 3 months, you sign a contract, it's $10,000 a month. It's $10,000 a month recurring revenue for the next 3 months. Your balance sheet better reflect that. Do not. And I guarantee you there's people out there that fudge that stuff and make it look like they've got. I worked for a guy who claimed, I probably shouldn't say this live, but I worked for a guy who claimed to have created $8 million in ARR. We weren't around a year. He spent 10 million.
Yeah.
Right. And he didn't pay our vendors and stuff like that. So like, what's $8 million in ARR? That doesn't mean anything. It's like the $250,000 or $350,000 OTE. What does that mean when nobody's reached it?
Yeah.
Right.
It's just all theory. And companies for sure do that. Like the first company I was at would have been doing that, because the even though the contract value was 20 or 24, they would collect 2 up front. But then they would be like, yeah, we hit $2 million this month or whatever in contract value, not not cash in bank. And then that comes down to the whole financial equations, and I think sellers should have more knowledge around and marketers as well for that matter, around the financials of the business, because that's where like ROAS, for example, is a terrible North Star metric to be following. Like, did Facebook give us a 10x ROAS or 5x ROAS, etc.? You can achieve a 5x ROAS and still go under, because you're not factoring in commissions, retainer costs, contractor costs, software costs, second purchase rates, retention rates, LTV, and even LTV is like a sort of a mythical number as well, in a sense. But you know what? There's fallacies.
Yeah, you know what's funny, Sam, too? Like most companies, and maybe this is just not the way it is in tech, like a software company, but most companies don't claim a profit in their first year, second year, fifth year, even in that case. In some cases, it sometimes takes 5-6 years before you become really profitable. In fact, most companies, smart companies, even startups, will not necessarily, even if they make money in the first year legitimately, they'll probably, on the taxes or whatever, they'll claim a loss, right? Because they'll add in deductions that'll just take them to a negative profitability, so that they could
reinvest.
They can reinvest the money. It's less the taxes or whatever it is. But that's what they do. And so it's amazing to hear some of these companies say, "Oh, we did $9 million in our first 18 months." Well, you didn't collect the $9 million. How much did you spend? It's like those financials are all just fluff in a way. It's to get people to want to join their company and to get hired, or to apply for a job in their company, or to use their software or whatever it is. A lot of times that's all that is. And people fall for it because they don't know the economics of the inner workings of a company and really what goes into figuring out whether or not $8 million in sales is actually profitable.
Yeah.
It's kind of like my friend, right? I used to make probably twice as much money as he did, and he had 3 kids and I had none. And he would say, "Mark, when are you gonna have a kid?" And I was like, "I can't afford it." And he goes, "What do you mean you can't afford it? I know you make like twice as much money as I do." I was like, "Yeah, dude, but you don't know what I spend."
Yeah. Yeah.
right? You don't know that I'm actually upside down on my house. Not now, but back then, I
Yeah.
was upside down on my house. I had a mortgage I couldn't afford, right? Like you don't know that. Just because you think I'm a sales guy and I'm closing deals and I was making a ton of money, but I was spending a whole lot of money too. So I
Yeah.
wasn't, I wasn't very profitable. And so like unless you really understand, like you said, the inner workings of the economics of how a business works, and this is business acumen again, right? Because once you
Mhm.
understand it about your own company, then you can talk intelligently with CEOs and CFOs and other
Yeah.
C-suiters because that's how they think and talk. They're not
That's
talking
what they
about
want to know.
the little nitty gritty, where's the impression come from and where's the
Yeah.
KPI for our marketing attribution. They're thinking profitability, they're thinking revenue, they're thinking EBITDA, right? And
Mm.
if you
Yeah.
understand those terms, you can talk at that level. People say,
And that's
"Oh, you could talk."
I when I was in that first role, I did a advanced diploma in financial planning on the back
Good
end,
for
just
you.
because I wanted to learn finances for myself because my
Mhm.
when I grew up, my like family household wasn't super financially literate and stuff, and I wanted to learn for myself as well. And now going forward, and this sort of ties into the Macca's days, like because I when I worked, I was a manager, like a store manager at the time, and I had to do like the numbers and count the till and do all that, do all the finances at the end of the day and or end of my
Mhm.
shift. And you could see like the interconnectivity of all the departments, like whether it was the cafe, the drive-through, the front of house, or the kitchen. Um, all of those departments had to be in sync to for the machine to work well, to be profitable. If they weren't in sync, if the kitchen was slow, if the front counter was slow, if drive-through was slow, if there was a kink in that system somewhere, everywhere suffered. And that's where like guess draw correlation to the ecosystem effect and all that sort of stuff.
Sure.
Um, but even from like a financial perspective, um, we make all these sales through the day, and then when you go and balance the books at the end of it, you're like, we also wasted this amount of product that we had to throw in the bin that got cooked
Yeah.
and didn't get used, and we spent this much on staff today, so we have to cut hours here. Like you just start thinking about it differently. Whereas when you're, I guess, kind of like siloed into whether it's sales or marketing or anywhere in a company, and you're not privy to those numbers, you don't think like when I was in sales, when I first was in sales, I had a bit of an ego and I was like, fuck, I'm making this company like 20 grand every time I make a sale, and I'm only making $500 of commission on that sale. But then there's all I wasn't aware or thinking of, and until after I did the course, of all the other expenses that go into actually making that machine run.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, it's like, well, at McDonald's, right? Like, or in retail like that, one of the challenges is a liability insurance, right?
Mm,
And things like that, because, you can have everything working like a well-oiled machine and somebody slips and falls because you just happen to not put that yellow sign on the floor after it was mopped. And now you
yeah,
have a lawsuit that's going to rip apart your entire profit for the whole year,
yeah,
or 2 years, or put you out of business. Usually it wouldn't because McDonald's will back you, but it's like you're right. It's like all those little things add up to potentially a bigger thing in either direction. Meaning, like a little misstep here could cause a downstream effect that you can't, you're not really sure. What I find amazing, though, when I looked at your background, and I do want to get into this, and we're well over time at this point, but I'm not sweating it. You worked at McDonald's, so I got to imagine you were eating it, right? And it was very early in your life, career, business career, so probably straight out of school or whatever it was, or high school or whatever. And I got to imagine it probably didn't. When I was eating a lot of McDonald's, I didn't. It took me a while, but at one point I got to where I really didn't feel good about myself when I was eating it. Every time I would go there, and this may sound really kind of mean to me a little bit, but there was a very heavy set woman that was the
yeah,
cashier sitting there and her arm out the window, and it was just like she was
oh,
overweight.
yeah,
And she actually, kind of ironically, but she actually made me stop going to McDonald's.
Yeah.
because I was like, damn, man, I'm like, ugh, I don't want to look like that. And not that I was getting close to that, but and I feel like she probably has a problem, whatever chemical imbalance that's causing the problem. That's
Yeah.
just really big. But and I feel for her, right? I wish there was more help for people like that. But it just made me think like, oh my God, it's such bad food, and you
Yeah.
shouldn't be eating it. I
No.
still eat it every now and again because my son loves McDonald's nuggets and fries. But tell
Yep.
me, like, how did you transition from doing that to working in probably what's considered one of the most unhealthy places to being in the best shape of your life, running a fitness company? Tell me about that.
Um, well, when I worked there, because it obviously, as I mentioned before, like with the university issue, I picked up the job and then I started doing. So I was already relatively healthy because I played.
Oh,
I was
okay.
in the youth level of the A League, which over here is like our top soccer league.
Right.
And then I had a bad back injury and so on and so forth. So that's when I was like PT and went into that space.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and so I never
So you were,
really,
yeah.
yeah, I never really ate the food. I ate the
Oh, good.
chicken breast, but yeah, like when you see what it's cooked in and stuff like that. So for me, it was just a job.
Yeah.
I
Okay. All
just
right.
wanted,
Good.
yeah, like I never embraced the Macca's lifestyle, but
Yeah.
I always wanted to be the best. Like that, I think that comes from like my sporting background. Is like I just always want to be the best. Um, and at Macca's, I started off just like everyone else as a crew, and then I was fortunate that when I started there, there was a new store opening in my hometown. So I did training at another store for 6 months. Then went to the new store, and within 3 months, I was promoted to manager. Um,
Nice. Yeah.
so even though I like obviously I wasn't really against the ethos. I was against the ethos of the company in terms of like the product it actually sells. Uh, I was more interested in the business
Management.
side of it, being the
Yeah.
best in there, and like our store was constantly at the top of this like the leaderboard for the country for
Nice.
Australia. We were always in the top three for speed and efficiency and KPIs and all that. Um,
That's awesome.
but then, yeah, in regards to like the other managers, there was probably a few that overindulged on the product. We'll say. Uh, but
Yeah.
yeah, they blew out a little bit. But the thing that kind of made me realize, because again, it was just kind of like a job to carry between, but
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to go higher and obviously stay there and stuff, and could have gone to the
Sure.
corporate side. But there was the corporate uh, like rep that kind of managed our area, and he would pop into our
Mhm.
store all the time. Um,
Mhm.
he was 27, going on like 47. Like looked a lot older than he actually was. Um, Very temperamental. Always stressed, running around from store to store to store. I'm like, that's not a life I want to live. Um, and then that was when I decided, like, I'll do my PT certs and
Mm.
get out of here.
Good for you. Well, listen, man. I just want to get into this one last quick thing. Obviously, you're running a business and you got a lot of things going on. I didn't even ask you if you are married and have children too, but if you got that in your life, it takes
Yeah,
a lot out of you. And I'm curious. Like I created this show on Wednesdays. I call it the Hump. I believe that this is the day of the week that you got to really just put the pedal to the metal and
mm,
maybe even try to hit your goals. And sometimes it takes a lot out of us. I sometimes get to Wednesday and I'm almost had it for the week. I want to give in, but I put some things together on Wednesdays. I make sure Wednesdays is really a quote unquote profitable day or productive day. And I do a few things to get me over it. I'm curious what you do to get you over the week, or what gets you kind of rolling into the weekend.
yeah. And I am married with a 10-month-old, so that
Oh,
has its own complexities and challenges that come with it, especially still
yeah,
working from home at the moment. Um, which is great because I get to be there, and enjoy the special moments while he's growing up, and
sure.
have that fortunate circumstance. But when it comes to Wednesdays, I'm similar to you in that I see it as like a pivotal point of the week where I want the majority. So like, I started this back in that first sales job, where I would have a whiteboard on the wall, and Monday I would always aim for 15 meetings booked, and I wouldn't leave until I'd hit it. And every meeting, I would slash a number off the whiteboard so everyone in the room could see. So there was pressure on from that side to make sure I get it.
I
Tuesday, I would
remember
aim
those
for
days.
12. Yeah, and then get that peer pressure. And then Wednesday, I would aim for 10. So that then I know by come Thursday, Friday, I only need to average, I think it was like eight and then 6, and I'm done.
Right.
So like
Yeah.
I could kind of wind down for the week.
Sure.
So that was one like psychological thing of like front loading the majority of the hard work into the like my freshest period of the week, so Monday, Tuesday,
Sure.
Wednesday, and then coming down after that. Uh, but something I always on Wednesdays, for example, I take it as a rest day from the gym. So I train Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, so
Mhm.
that I can put those extra hours in the morning,
Nice.
plus give my body some time to like kind of recoup because
Mhm.
not only the mental energy from running the business and working, but the mental drainage of going to the gym and obviously working your body, etc. I use Wednesday as like a physical rest day, but a mental hard day, so that then Thursday, Friday are typically less mentally stressful, but I can go harder in the gym as well. So then come the weekend, I feel like I've worked my body hard, I've worked my mind hard. I still work over the weekends, as probably most of us do, especially when you run a business. But
Doesn't.
I work on the business instead of in the business a bit more, and can spend a bit more time with the family. So exhausting the mind at the start of the week, exhaust the body at the end of the week, and
Right.
then rest for the weekend.
Excellent, man. Well, great. I appreciate you sharing. I hope some of the listeners or people who will listen can gain some insights into that. Tell me, the 10-month-old, is it a boy or a girl?
Little boy, yeah, Mason.
What, Mason? Nice.
Yep. So he's
Congratulations. And your first, obviously.
first one,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. Well, hey, listen, it's the first one is the hardest one, and don't let anybody tell you that. Um, Cherish the moments because they go so fast. I don't know what any of those people are talking about, right? Like those people who say that to you don't remember. They don't.
The
Their kids
challenger.
are grown. Their kids are grown or teenagers and they say, "Oh, 10 months old. Oh, what a great time." Cherish those moments because it go by like that. I wish it would go by like that. My son is 9 years old. It's felt like 90 years. I swear to God. I had hair before he was born. I did.
Um,
I never got sick before he was
until
born. Now I get sick because he used to bring things back from daycare. He don't bring too much back now, but like, so
yeah,
that you're gonna find that once you send your kid off to somewhere where he's with a whole bunch of other kids, he's gonna come back with colds and sicknesses, and then you're gonna get it, and you're like, what is this? And like, you think your body's
yeah,
gonna fight it off. It's not. If you don't get sick normally, you will, guaranteed, when your kid comes
yeah.
back with. It's just the way it
And
is.
he's at 10 months old as well. He's still like Amy, my wife. She's still home full time, which is helpful because obviously
Nice.
she can look after him.
That's
Uh,
great.
but he's still super clingy, like in terms of doesn't he'll play independently for a bit. But if you like walk off and obviously leave him alone, he's falling off something or he's climbing into something he
Of
shouldn't
course.
be in, and like it's a full time job to keep an eye on.
Oh,
And I was
absolutely.
saying to Amy the other day, just what you said then, like I can't wait till he's at that stage where he can actually articulate like safety or even understand the concept of gravity. If I crawl onto this thing and crawl off, I'm gonna fall and hit my head. Uh,
Yeah.
I'm
No, they
waiting.
don't know that now. 10 months old, he doesn't know. Trust me. I guess maybe that's even why my son, like, he's pretty good. He's not like a wild child. He doesn't jump. He wasn't always he wasn't that kid who was like getting in, like jumping off of things and like a wild boy. He was actually a calm boy, which was great. But listen, man, thanks for taking the time to come on the show. I appreciate it. I gave you an extra 38 minutes. Of course, I don't normally do that.
I
But thank
appreciate
you everybody for listening. Sam, where can we find you? How do we find you? What's the best way to reach you if anybody wants to get in touch?
it. LinkedIn's probably the primary channel that I sit on, or they can jump to the website. It's not the classiest website because I threw it together. It's on the low priority roadmap list of things for the company, but they can hit me up there or LinkedIn will get me directly.
Nice. Well, listen, man, I appreciate it. Good luck with your 10-month-old Mason. Enjoy the rest of your. I don't even know what time is it. Like tomorrow at
10
11
past
o'clock now,
11.
or
Yeah.
10 past 11. Wow. It's funny. I remember, I mean, maybe you were too young, but back in 1999, there was this thing called Y2K.
Yeah.
Right, where the computer systems were going to turn over and the numbers were going to change so drastically, and everybody thought the world was going to shut down. Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I made a ton of money in December of that year. I worked for a consulting company, and we did Y2K work. And
Nice.
but the funny thing is that, like, with you guys being so far ahead, right? Like my thought process on that back then even was, because we had a London-based company, we had a London-based office. I said, well, they're 5 hours ahead, 6 hours ahead. Australia, obviously 16. But I was like, oh, it's tomorrow already there. Let's just call them and see what's going on, And it was like,
As the country
but
ended.
America hadn't changed. The clocks here hadn't changed. So it really, so like everything worked fine in the UK. Probably worked fine in Australia. They told the UK everything was fine. And then when finally America and everybody was up in arms. I mean, literally, we were billing, like I was billing thousands of dollars an hour right up until midnight, 1999. It was fantastic.
Just to stay safe.
It was great.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, 9/11 hit and it was over. But thanks everybody. Thanks for joining. Join again next week. The Hump. Actually, next week we got who do we got next week? I think we got Lydia Hutchinson, my co-call pal. She's coming on, and we got a couple of more. We're taking a break for obviously Christmas Day. I'm not going to do a show, and New Year's Day, even though those are hump days. And we'll be back on, I believe it's the 6th or the 3rd of January. But thanks, Sam. I appreciate it. Go check out shapersos.com and have a great hump day. Peace.
Thanks, Mark. Do we exit?